Hey you! I need your help.
So with this, are we entering like a full motion video resurgence or something? If so, I'm totally down for it. Double Switch 25th Anniversary Edition is a remaster of the game that came out 25 years ago. Much in the same vein as Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition. In fact, the developer of Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition, Screaming Villains, was also one of the developers of this remaster. So did Double Switch get the same loving care that Night Trap did? And does the game stand up 25 years later? Yeah, kinda. Double Switch the game is, much like Night Trap, a full motion video game. Most of the game consists of you watching full motion video of different rooms in an old apartment complex, following the various wacky characters around, as most of them look for a hidden treasure that's supposedly within the walls of the place. You also interact with the character of Eddie, played by Corey Haim. This was right at the end of Corey Haim's fame, but before he went all the way down the drug-fueled lifestyle that eventually ended his life some years later. Oddly enough, on a side note, Night Trap's main character, played by Dana Plato, also died of complications to drug use years after the game was released. Doesn't have a lot of bearing on the game, but the coincidence is there. Much like Night Trap, the main gameplay element of Double Switch is to trap the bad guys. But Double Switch amps up the gameplay a bit and makes it a little bit more gamey than Night Trap was by adding more layers to the actual gameplay. Now, instead of just clicking on a button when a bad guy gets near a certain part of a room, the rooms have multiple traps. And not only do they have multiple traps, you have to prime the traps and arm the traps and then set the traps off. But it has to be the right trap. You have to guess which part of the room and ultimately which trap they're going to cross before they get there so that you can prime, arm, and set off the trap when they get there. You also have to manage the power of the apartment complex. You can stage the traps by arming them without setting them off so that you can set them off quicker later on. Every time you prime or arm a trap, it fills the power meter of the apartment complex a little bit. If it goes into the red, it'll cancel out everything you've primed or armed. You also have to keep an eye out for a lot more in Double Switch than you did Night Trap. In Night Trap, besides catching the monsters, the only thing you really had to keep an eye out for was you needed to make sure that you were in the right room at the right time so that you could hear when they changed the code. In this one, you have to be in the right place at the right time to see bits and pieces of a code you're trying to get to release the character Eddie from the basement in the first act. And little things like that continue throughout the whole game and its 3 other acts. You also have to keep an eye on the basement and the main power to the apartment complex, because people are constantly trying to go and shut the power down. If you miss one of these moments and the power does get shut off, then the game ends instantly. Thankfully, there are save points at the beginning of each act, so it doesn't necessarily mean you get booted all the way back to the beginning of the game. Another difference between this and Night Trap is that Night Trap had a constant clock going. So you could ultimately just write down the times that the monster showed up in specific rooms and that the codes changed in a room, and then go back and know when they're going to be there so that you could hit all the monsters. You can't do that in Double Switch. First of all, there is no clock. Secondly, some of the bad guys are randomized, while the movie parts of the game happen in the same places at the same times every time. Where the bad guys show up is randomized. This does make it seem a bit more gamey, if you will. And this, coupled with all the other little things they've added to the gameplay formula, increased the challenge in Double Switch over Night Trap considerably. You are going to replay scenes a lot, and that can be either a good thing or a bad thing dependent upon how you feel about the FMV genre. The story in Double Switch is another difference from Night Trap. While Night Trap was more of a campy horror movie vibe, Double Switch has a cheesy mystery movie vibe. And while I enjoy that, I won't lie, I do like that campy horror movie vibe that Night Trap offered more. Part of it may be that Double Switch is more goofy or cheesy than Night Trap was. Now, Night Trap was no work of art. It was definitely campy, but there is a difference between campy and cheesy. It almost seems like Double Switch is trying a little bit too hard sometimes. That's not to say it's bad. It's still a good time and has an interesting enough story to keep you moving forward. But from a strictly story perspective and what happens on screen, Night Trap was a bit better in this department. Something that Double Switch does do better than Night Trap, though, is the production values. The game just looks a lot better. The video, the sets, the sound, everything about it is much higher in quality, which makes sense. It came out after Night Trap and definitely as a result of Night Trap, so they were probably afforded more money to make this. But even more so than that, while it did only come out about 2 years after Night Trap, fact of the matter was it was actually made 7 years after Night Trap, because while Night Trap came out in 1992, it was actually filmed and produced in 1987 and just sat on the shelf all that time until it was eventually released on the Sega CD. Now, from a video quality perspective, back in the day, Double Switch definitely looked better than Night Trap. But now with this edition, compared to the Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition, they both look pretty similar as far as video quality. Now, what's on screen, Double Switch has it hand over fist. But from just pure clarity on screen, both of them are pretty similar in that respect. So let's talk about all the new bells and whistles they have for this new version of Double Switch. Much like its Night Trap cousin, this version of Double Switch receives all the nice upgrades and bells and whistles that Night Trap did. It looks great, the presentation is clean, the new interface is crisp, and you now have the option of having a little preview window instead of just a static image like you did in Night Trap. Now granted, it wasn't as much of a problem with Double Switch because the original version didn't just have a static image, it had 3 little colored bars that signified what type of person was in the room at the time. And you can still play that way, or you can go with the new little video thumbnail. I myself am a little colorblind, so I did have a little bit more difficult time deciphering the colors in the bars, so I like the little video image there instead of the old school bars. Something this version is lacking though is the supplemental materials. It does have some, but nowhere near as many as the remaster of Night Trap did. It almost seems like this wasn't quite as much of a passion project as Night Trap was. It may be that, or it may just be the fact that there's not as many supplemental materials available for this game, due to the fact that its production wasn't as long and storied, nor was it anywhere near as controversial as Night Trap was. In fact, I don't think it was controversial at all. It plays it pretty safe in that department. Something else I noticed about this over Night Trap was that the initial release doesn't have nearly as many bugs as Night Trap did. Night Trap wasn't a buggy mess, but it did have some little odd bugs here and there that they eventually did patch out. Things like not being able to exit out of the game over screen, and there was a certain point in the game that it would glitch out and you couldn't get past for a while. Beyond that literal game-breaking bug, that they did, by the way, fix fairly quickly, all the issues I encountered were little intricacies like the exiting out of that menu I told you about, in the menu system. There's a couple little oddities here in this one, but nowhere near as many as it was in the Night Trap release. And none of them just leave you stuck in a menu you can't get out of. So while I'm sure all of those will be patched out if by the time you watch this they haven't already been, the fact that there were less in the beginning I did take notice of. I tried Double Switch out with both of its control schemes. You can play it with either a controller or with a mouse. The game has also been released on the PS4, which I'm assuming is where the controller support came from. But really, the controller can't hold a candle to the mouse. And I'm not one of those guys who's like a PC master race that says the mouse is always better than the controller. I actually really enjoy using a controller to play a lot of games. But this game is a lot more about quickly navigating menus, and you can do that much quicker and more effectively with a mouse. That's just a fact. But if you don't have that option, or just really want to use a controller for everything, the option's there, and it's still very playable. In the end, Double Switch 25th Anniversary is a solid entry into the full motion video genre. While the level of love put into this isn't quite as high as it was into Night Trap, it's still a great quality product. While the new gameplay elements can make it a bit harder to get into at first, once you get them, there's a really good time to be had here if you're a fan of the genre. And that's the key here, if you're a fan of the genre. If you are a fan of full motion video games, grew up with them and loved them, or maybe you played the new 25th anniversary of Night Trap and really enjoyed it, I'd say that Double Switch 25th Anniversary is absolutely worth a buy. However, for everybody else out there, which unfortunately is going to be the vast majority, I can't really recommend Double Switch. While I was able to overall recommend Night Trap 25th Anniversary due to it being a bit more accessible and just because it is such a part of video game history and all the supplementals and everything you get that go along with that, Double Switch just isn't. I absolutely adore full motion video games, so I had a great time with this, but I know most people out there aren't going to. So I don't want to tell you to go buy something that you're going to end up not liking. So for everybody else, I'm going to have to tell you to pass this one over and leave it to the history books. It's just not worth it, and if you don't like FMV, you're not going to like this. So there it is, guys, my review of Double Switch 25th Anniversary Edition. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. When I said cheesy, I mean cheesy. Man, the stuff they made in the early 90s was really out there.